Good morning. It is Friday, April 15th, 2022. Welcome to another edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. This morning, the Black press will weigh in on these recent reports about the $6 million Southern California compound purchased by the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which raised eyebrows among the organization's supporters and served as fodder for flames lit by its detractors. The 6,500 square foot Studio City home features 7 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, a soundstage, music studio, pool, and parking for more than 20 cars. It was purchased in October 2020 with the support of Diane Pascoe, a Black real estate expert, and bought after the organization received a $90 million windfall in the wake of Minneapolis's police officer's murder of George Floyd in May of 2020. In a roundtable with members of the Black press, Black Lives Matter co-founder Patrisse Cullors, former head of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, addressed the purchase of the home and how reports about it have impacted their security and that of the organization. Patrisse began her remarks by clarifying the three arms of the Black Lives Matter ecosystem. They are different. She says they are 3 organizations. There's Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which she's the former executive director of. There's a Black Lives Matter PAC, which endorses candidates and policy. And then there's Black Lives Matter Grassroots, that was really founded from the chapters, Patrisse says. She said that it's important that people understand the differences between the 3 entities as they have different operations and different goals. She says, same goal for Black liberation, but different takes on that. In addressing the acquisition of the property, Patrisse said it's really important for folks to understand that the acquiring of the multi-purpose property happened in October 2020. For us, it was a huge accomplishment, and I'm speaking specifically to Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation. She added that despite what has been reported, Black Lives Matter has not been financially solvent. She went on to say, securing a Black space is neither a crime nor a hustle. That is really important for you all to understand, especially as there's a long legacy of Black people securing and wanting to secure land and property, especially when it comes to organizations. We want to see Black Lives Matter exist for a very long time. We want to see the legacy of it exist for a very long time. And there's so many other legacy organizations that have their own buildings. And because it's a part of that legacy, she says, it shouldn't be a problem. Well, all of that we're going to discuss. Also, the president's Equity Action Plan, and Serena Williams caps Black Maternity Health Week with an eye-opening essay about her near-death experience while giving birth. We welcome Oshia Boyd of the Indianapolis Recorder, and of course, our number 1 correspondent, James Wright Jr. of the Washington Informer. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
So, first, I'm going to start with you, Oshia. The controversy, should it be a controversy that the Black Lives Matter Foundation has this property?
Should it be a controversy? Probably not, but it is. And I think the organizers should have maybe thought ahead to think about how this would look. So buying the property is not necessarily a mistake. It's not a bad thing. But as we know, when Black people do things, there's tons of scrutiny. So that you always want to make sure that anything you do is on the up and up. And it looks there's no question of impropriety. I was actually looking as you were talking, looking at some articles about the purchase of the house. And one of the articles said was bought in secret.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it was bought in secret. Like, you don't go around telling everybody you're about to buy property,
Right.
but it's that kind of, you don't want people to have that kind of fodder, that kind of ammunition, especially against something called Black Lives Matter. It's Black women, Black lives. So it's already going to be under scrutiny.
Yeah. So James, so do we operate in that manner that because we're Black, we gotta be extra careful about how we present things or how things are presented?
Well, back in the civil rights movement, and this is something that people need to understand. Dr. King co-founded the SCLC, And a lot of times when he would have large bills, he would just send the bill to the NAACP, and the NAACP would pay for that bill. SCLC took quite some time in order to get its own headquarters. And so I think that when I look at this controversy, I think about this. I really take offense a little bit to the idea that just because Black Lives Matter is an organization that supports the aspirations of African people, that it has to be poor and broke and disgusted and that sort of thing. You know, they get a lot of money from George Soros, and that's okay. Because if the Koch brothers can fund all these right-wing organizations, why can't George Soros or Robert F. Smith give money to Black Lives Matter? So I really take umbrage to anybody who does not like the business model of Black Lives Matter, because they have a right to prosper too. And if they prosper, so do Black people.
Well, part of the argument too is playing devil's advocate, or Shia, is from some of the chapters of Black Lives Matter saying the opposite, James, that yeah, the higher ups are prospering, not us. We can't catch a break, they're saying.
That was my question I was going to pose to James. So if they're prospering, how are we as Black people prospering? Because if the people, the boots on the ground people, are saying we're not seeing this, we're not seeing any of this windfall, then how are they prospering? I do believe if you should be accountable to Black people. I do believe. I don't think that they should be poor or struggling. I don't believe that. But if we're talking about collective uplift, then we need to see collective uplift. That is the whole point of the movement, of the organization. And that's all I'm saying. If we're talking about collective uplift, I want to see collective uplift. And granted, you're going to always have detractors and people who say things. You're going to always have that. But when you're talking about collective uplift, you need to make sure you're living up to that promise that you made, that you came. This was their organization. We didn't create it. They created it. So then, therefore, they need to live up to that standard.
So with, in 2020, Black Lives Matter received somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million, right? And it's you said this is their organization. So who are they accountable to? Are they really accountable to us individually as Black people? Or are they just accountable to the organization? Who are they accountable to, James?
See, this is the problem, Stacey. You know, when Black Lives Matter gets nearly $100 million from a lawsuit in terms of the George Floyd situation, and these big contributions from George Soros and people like that, we're ready to rush to judgment and say that they're wrong. But we don't say anything when these right-wing organizations get all kinds of money from the Koch brothers and to do their deeds. And so I think that the problem with this is that they really need to restructure this thing in order to see that the individual chapters of BLM get some sort of windfall from this. And that's an intra-organization type of thing. And this is why you have this bad publicity coming out. But again, I really, really am somewhat offended that the idea that if you're pushing for civil rights and human rights, that your organization has to be broke, busted, and disgusted. And I just don't go for that.
Well, now they are a nonprofit. And the question simply is, who are we? Who is the media to tell them how to use the funds that they get? They are governed. They are governed under nonprofit guidelines. But again, who are we to tell them how to use their money? Some will say, Oshia.
Who are we? We're not telling them how to use their money. I don't think that's what I'm saying. I don't think that's what maybe some people are saying. I don't know. But that's not my point. I'm not disagreeing with James. I agree with your points. I'm just saying that there is due diligence that needs to be done and always should be done. That's my whole thing. I definitely think I was definitely on board with the women and defending the women when people were coming out saying, well, they're getting money from George Soros. Yeah, why can't they get money from George Soros? He's, like you said, the Koch brothers are giving money to right-wing things. But here's where things change, though, for me, is also we're donating. Black people are donating. Black people who don't have a lot of money are donating to this cause, and you're donating off the deaths of other Black people. That is why I think it's so important that you do this thing correctly. We can't just say, well, other people, other organizations do it. But the money, the donations are coming in because of Black people dying. And this is the whole galvanization of the movement. So for me, it means much more. And we have to make sure that it's done right. And I think we as Black media should hold them accountable and should ask questions. We shouldn't let people, just because they're Black, say, oh, okay, well, we're going to give them a pass because they're Black and they don't know how to do things. No, it's up to you to get your education to learn how to do those things. We should hold Black people accountable, period.
Well, one of the points that Patrice Cullors made is about generational wealth, right? And keeping the organization solvent for decades, perhaps centuries to come, James. So purchasing a house, some say, okay, we could see purchasing a house, but $6 million. I think that that's unfair too, given the price of housing today, and houses today, especially in the San Fernando Valley in California, where that home is, James. But again, what are people expecting from Black Lives Matter? Are they expecting more than they do from other nonprofits?
I think that was a good business decision on their part. By purchasing the property in that particular place, they're making sure that they have solid assets, and they're making sure that those assets will last for decades, and hoping that they hold on to the property. That is good, sound business principles. And these nonprofits need to do more of that. So instead of condemning BLM, BLM should be praised for their business acumen. I mean, we don't want to go back to the days when Dr. King had a bill for SCLC in the 1950s, and he would send the bill to the NAACP. We don't want to go back to those days. We don't want to continue to have these days, Stacey, where you have these Black civil rights leaders begging large corporations. Notice I didn't say ask, I said begging large corporations and billionaires and millionaires for money, when they can set themselves up with a strong real estate foundation that's an asset that can sustain itself, and use the word we love to throw around, generational wealth, in terms of BLM.
Well, I'm going to leave it with Shia. So transparency is extremely important. And you made the point earlier, but I want you to just expand a little bit on why is it so important for Black organizations, particularly Black Lives Matter?
Well, I think it's so important because, like I said earlier, this organization was galvanized on the deaths of Black people, Black men. Black people we know majority of Black people live in poverty. Mm-hmm. We're donating money to this organization. We have the idea that we want to see this organization thrive. So for those reasons alone, they should be transparent, just because it just looks better to be transparent than it doesn't. It looks like you're hiding things when you're not transparent. And when you have people in your organization complain about, well, we're struggling, we're out here, and you have the organizers who look to be. Now, we don't know if they are, but the presentation is that they're living a good life. Yeah. And these people are saying they're trained Marxists. So the idea is, if you're a trained Marxist, to me, maybe I don't know what trained Marxism means, but when I hear that, I think you're about communal collective uplift. So when I hear that, I think, oh, okay, well then how then are you living up to what you told me you are? And I think that is the issue. I don't necessarily think it was bought in secret. I don't necessarily believe that it was something untoward going on. They were being sneaky. I don't necessarily believe that. But I believe that when you're not transparent, at least with the people in your organization, you don't have to be transparent with all of America, but at least with the ones in your organization, so they know what's going on. I think that's the problem.
Well, we felt the need to weigh in on this because, of course, mainstream media is having a field day with it now, and we should be talking about our business, right? It's like go the Oscar slap, right? That's our business. People said, well, this definitely is our business. So we wanted to talk about it from the Black press's perspective, and we will continue to follow it. And hopefully they will be treated the same way other organizations are treated, in a sense that they're not held to a different standard. Yesterday, James and Oshia, the White House and 90 plus agencies in the federal government released their Equity Action Plan. It's aimed at advancing racial and gender equity across the federal government to improve diversity. The strategy, the idea of the strategy is working to ensure that the federal government is a model for diversity and equity and preventing discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation, the White House said in a fact sheet that they issued to us yesterday. Each agency is taking steps to improve equity by implementing new rules, according to a senior administration official. So James, Oshia, President Biden, a year ago, well, actually not even more than a year ago, the moment he took office, he signed an executive order on diversity and equity. And now, big, huge announcement across the government yesterday. Ambassador Susan Rice also spoke on this yesterday as well. Great, this administration, when it comes to doing what perhaps others haven't really done on this scope. Now I'll start with you, James, because you're our historian.
Well, I'll just say very, very quickly on this, and I'll be happy to expand on it, that this is a comprehensive, as you said, piece in terms of the federal government, who at one time was the biggest discriminator in terms of Black people trying to get employment with it, because, you know, I live in Washington, D.C., so those type of things we talk about. The thing is that we have to put some teeth into it. This is wonderful. This is good optics. It's good to say. We need to put some teeth into it. And also, and I don't want to be a little controversial here, it needs to include Black people in terms of Black people getting jobs. It's fine if the LGBTQ is treated fairly and everyone else, but Black people need to be treated fairly.
Well, you know, one thing, Oshia, I will say, and you know, I'm not taking one side or the other, but I will say, you walk into the White House and you see a lot of Black people, to your point, and really strong positions inside the White House, throughout the cabinet. It's really unprecedented that this administration has hired so many African Americans, other people of color too, but particularly African Americans.
You said in the White House, though. So when I'm thinking, but I'm thinking federal government in general. So that's more than the White House.
Absolutely.
And so so James hit it right on the nail right on the head for me. When I see people of color, I have no problem with people of color, but I need you to say Black people as well, because oftentimes in that people of color, we still get left behind. It becomes we're down here. We get left at the bottom. So I want to see, it's not just diversity and equity. It's not just, but it actually has something for Black people, and not just in the White House. Because here's my fear. Biden, we don't know what's going to happen the next election. So does that mean all those people that you're just talking about are gone? You know, where are they going to be? These are and this is a Biden administration measure. So what happens when we get another president? Where's the teeth to make sure these things stay in place? It is not a temporary adjustment to or temporary correction. We need to actually make sure it stays in place. People keep their jobs, and we see more than Black people just in the White House. We want them. They should be all over the federal government, wherever. And there's points for each department, and so and a lot of them say people of color. There's not a lot of specificity with what people of color means. So if you get Asians and Native Americans, Latinos, that's people of color, but there could still be no Black people.
Yeah, well, you sound like David Youngblood writes in, these rules will disappear if the Democrats lose the House and the White House in 2024. Great points, of course, and we'll see what this really leads to. Um, it's a wait and see thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to reserve judgment. My point about walking into the White House and seeing a lot of Black people in positions is that if that's an indication of what's going on throughout the federal government, which I'm not saying it is, but if it is an indication, then things are looking up.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point. But
Mm-hmm.
we move on. Each year in the United States, about 700 people die during pregnancy or the year after, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Another 50,000 people each year have unexpected labor and delivery outcomes with serious short or long-term health consequences. Every pregnancy-related death is tragic, especially because 2 in 3 of them are preventable, according to the CDC. Well, Black Maternal Health Week runs through the 17th, actually. And for tennis superstar Serena Williams, giving birth to her baby, it turned out was a test for how loud and how often she would have to call out before finally being heard. Williams penned an essay for Elle magazine's April issue in which she recounted her reckoning that proved once again that Black women remain 3 times more likely to die after childbirth than white women. She says she was almost one of them. She says, I've suffered every injury imaginable and I know my body. She went on to talk about giving birth to her baby. It turned out was a test for how loud and how often I would have to call out before being heard. She said the nurse told her, now Serena had a history of blood clots, and
Mm-hmm.
she knew her history. And she said she had told the nurse she was going to need something. I forget the name of the medication. The nurse told her basically she was just being crazy because she
Mm-hmm.
was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out
Mm-hmm.
she needed that medication. She almost died.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to say I was excited to talk about this, but I just wrote my column this week on this because it's Black Maternal Health Week. And so in 2020, a pediatric doctor, Dr. Shanice Wallace, died. Um, she was the pediatric chief resident at IU, Indiana University School of Medicine. She died after giving birth. We know Judge Hatchett's daughter-in-law, Kira Johnson, died back in 2016 after giving birth, a C-section, emergency C-section. Another woman, Shalon Irving, a 36-year-old epidemiologist from for the CDC, died after giving birth. This cuts for Black women. It does not matter your social economic status. It does not matter. Black women die at higher rates. People aren't listening to Black women. When we say we're in pain, I've had 2 C-sections. My first one was an emergency. Luckily, I had a good doctor. And he listened to me. In Indiana, 53 Black mothers die per 100,000 live births. And it's 53, and it's not much better for white women either. 42 white women died in Indiana. And in this country, it is a crisis for regardless. White women, Black women, but majority of Black women are dying in this country. When you are a Black woman from another country, your maternal mortality rate is on par with white women. Until you come here, and then your child, your daughter, is now the maternal mortality rate is higher. The risk is higher for death. So it's something about America. It's something about America. And what that something is racism, implicit bias, the stress, all the things that come along with being Black and being a Black woman in America puts us in jeopardy. Then when you get into the hospital, you have all these other issues. And again, it's not about if you have insurance or don't have insurance, if you go to the doctor, if you're doing what you're supposed to do. These women are doing things right, quote unquote, right. And
Yeah,
they're still
well,
dying.
yeah, and your point is right on, because we're talking about Serena Williams, a very wealthy, very famous Black woman who still experience what most Black women experience when they are giving birth. James, It has to be unsettling to know that, as Oshia pointed out, it does not matter for Black women or for women in general, but particularly Black women, your social economic standing.
Yeah, that's the thing that's mind blowing about Serena
Mhm.
Williams. She's wealthy. She has access because of her money to the best, we believe, the best medical facilities and doctors in the world. So if she needed to, she could fly a doctor from South Africa or from anywhere in terms of her wealth. She could do that. And those of us who are not women, we are now opening up to the fact, because we take birth for granted, because we
Mhm.
don't have to go through birth. So we take it for granted because babies are born every day. But this is really a terrible problem. And I am in the District of Columbia, where in Ward 8, which is a majority Black and with a lot of poor people, the infant mortality rate is much higher than in Ward 3, which is predominantly white and wealthy. And so you have this disparity that needs to be taken more seriously
Mhm.
by lawmakers
Mhm.
and legislators on the national and, in Sia's case, state, and in my case, the city, in order to see that this problem is solved.
Yeah, Oshia, um, as you mentioned, you did an article. It's Black Maternal Health Week. Shouldn't it be more than just a week, though? I mean, because this is a serious,
Yeah.
serious issue that's ongoing.
Yes. In Indiana, I know that our legislators, our Black legislators, have been taking this up annually to actually affect change. Our governor has been paying attention. We are actually trying to make moves in that direction. For me, as editor of the Recorder, it's something that I've been doing periodically since 2018. I assumed, like most people assume, as James just alluded to, like babies are born every day, everybody's fine. Everyone I've known has had a baby's been fine, you know. So I didn't think people. I thought people dying was way back in the past. You know,
Right.
that's not happening anymore until I started getting the numbers. And when you start talking about infant mortality, that's a whole nother. I mean, they're connected, but um, it's even more like pressing that we do something. I talked to a doctor and she put it and she gave me this visual that I will never forget. She was saying you can fill a bus with Black babies that have died every year,
Goodness
a
grief.
school bus. And
Goodness.
I was just blown away by that visual, because now it made it real. That's how many Black babies we're losing every year. And none of us really knew this. You know, none of us. It's like it's below the radar. We don't know this. Um, but so my
Why don't
charge
we
has been,
know, Oshia?
that's what I was just going to say. I don't know why we don't know. I didn't know, you know, because
Yeah.
like I said, so many of us are fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's when I say 53 out of 100,000, 53 out of 100,000. That's not a lot when you look at that number, but it's a lot when you think about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to happen. It's preventable. So if we don't know 53 people, you know, in that 100,000, then we don't realize it's happening, and no one's talking about it. For the longest, people didn't talk about it. You
Yeah,
know, so
there's your
it's
article right there
yeah,
too. It's Black Maternal Health Week, and it's still needed. I think, as I was saying, Oshia, I think we need Black Maternal Health Year.
yeah,
we
Mm,
don't we don't
mm,
need a week. We
mhm.
need a year. I mean, as you said, 53, and when you put that into context, like you said, you say 53, 100,000. That doesn't every life, every life that is lost is extremely precious, and so 53, when it really should not be anywhere close to that number.
no,
It really should be zero when you think about it, because like
Thank
you
you.
said, you made a point that, and I said the same thing, Oshia and James, that when you think about people dying trying to give birth or giving birth, you think about decades and decades and decades ago, right?
mhm,
A century
mhm,
ago, maybe.
mhm.
But no, it's happening today, 2022, in the 21st century. It's just, healthcare. I think you hit the nail on the head again. You talked about racism. We still are talking about the White House. Vice President Kamala Harris was still talking about the fact that we have to figure out a way to bring some sort of understanding to the medical community. So, I mean, understanding, no, you need to just clean things out sometimes, right? I mean, come on, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, it shows systems. It shows that there are systems in place that work against Black people. And there was a researcher, I can't think of her name, but she talks about the weathering that happens in the womb for Black women because we're under so much stress by being Black. And just all the things that happen, all the microaggressions, all the macroaggressions that you deal with on a regular basis, and how that internalizes, how that affects our bodies. There's so many things that we don't know that that make giving birth a problem for Black women that other women don't have to deal with. When we talk about maternal mortality, infant mortality, it's a problem across the nation. But like most other things, it affects Black people more. We're dying at a higher rate. And again, it's preventable. It's preventable. Not listening to the woman telling you she's in pain.
Yeah.
That's a choice.
Yeah.
Kira Johnson bled out. She bled for hours and hours and hours. And she was at Cedars-Sinai. Everything I've ever heard about that place is that that's an amazing hospital. You want to go there. She told him something wasn't right over and over until finally after hours. And I want to say it may have been like 12 hours. They finally rushed her into emergency surgery. It was too late.
Wow.
It was too late. And her husband has gone to Congress to enact a law. So if you read her story, Judge Hatcher, she said she was in great shape. She ran, she worked out every day. She spoke several languages. She was well traveled. Again, these are not women who, quote unquote, are not, these are not women who you say, well, they didn't go to the doctor. They didn't know how. These are not those kind of women, because we, of course, want to blame the women.
Right.
We want to find an excuse and say, well, they didn't go to the doctor. They didn't do what they're supposed to do. They didn't take care of their bodies. No, these women were taking care of their bodies, and they're still not here or near misses. And that's a problem. That's a problem. When all you have to do is listen to me if I say, hey, something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
All you have to do is check. It's a simple check. Listen to me say, I just don't feel like myself. I'm in pain. Oh, that's normal. No. It's just that simple. It is really that simple. But yet that's not happening. And that is frightening. That is frightening.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, again, the case of Serena Williams. It wasn't certainly not about her not having the resources. It was about the medical professionals ignoring her, not listening to her. And that is a major problem. And we're going to continue to follow that. We encourage you. And I always encourage folks to read us, Black Press USA, read our members, Indianapolis Recorder, Washington Informer, the Los Angeles Sentinel, so forth and so on. But read Elle magazines. Read Serena Williams' piece in Elle magazine. Really eye-opening there. A very riveting account that she gave, where she really talks about how she almost died. Black Maternal Health Week continues through Sunday. Hey, hug a Black woman and love a Black woman, especially one that's carrying your child. We will see you next week.